Hey, welcome back to Soumya's Chai and Chat. Today is the last episode with our favorite gardener and plant mom, Lavanya Dantuluri. In previous episodes, we learned about indoor gardening, what are the pros and how to grow in plant in our homes. Today, we will be going over best methods for outdoor gardening, some of the tips that Lavanya has learned through her experience, and we'll be sharing them. Stay tuned. Okay, Lavanya, let's move to outdoors from indoors now. Your garden, even during the peak of summer, is lush green and blooming with life. I'm curious to know how long you've been in Arizona and how you've been able to maintain such beautiful greenery in your outdoors.
Yeah, I've lived in Arizona for about 18 years now. And the garden is only six to 6.5 years old. So this was our first build it from scratch project, the front and the backyard. So what we realized in Arizona is if you have to constantly are in the battle with nature, you have to make nature work for you. We started learning from people how they build microclimates. That is where you take a piece of your yard based on whatever exposure it is. You start tucking in the resilient trees first. You get them into the ground. Once they're established, then you go for the ones which are not as resilient and they need protection. Instead of constantly working on putting shade cloths and things like that, you make the trees help you raise the other trees. So like a simple example, you're seeing out of this window is a Nicanthus arbotritis, also known as the Parijata. It's a jasmine variety. So this is the east side of the house. So we got the plant when it had only 5 leaves.
Oh, wow.
Literally 5 leaves.
And it's huge now.
It's huge now and it's 4 years old. Wow. So the very first thing is, again, you're constantly battling with the elements. So this side of the yard didn't have much protection apart from the house itself giving it the shade. So for the first few months, I actually put a chair on top of it to give it the shade from the mid-afternoon and, around 10 o'clock it gets really hot. And the plants start to get cooked in the heat. So try to look for simpler solutions for protecting your plant when they're really vulnerable at that age. So once it took off and the roots got established, it grew really well in this direction. And during winters, the house actually gives it enough amount of the heat that escapes from the walls and windows, and it keeps the plant warm. So I think the first winter we protected it during the freeze, but after that it has been on its own. So once we got the Parijata in and it's been established, I have tucked in a lot of plants under it, which do not like the heat, but they'll take the filtered sun. So I have a lot of chrysanthemums that have been surviving for many years now. And then we have put the new loquat trio there. It's about 2 years old now. It's thriving. It hates the heat. So it provides it a full protection against the wind and the heat and the cold. And then I have tucked in a lot of new plumerias that have gone closer to the home now. And I've tucked in a few lavenders under it. So maybe another 2 years or 3 years, this area is going to look a lot more greener than it already is. So building these microclimates, you'll be surprised. After a while, you cannot tell which leaf belongs to which tree. They just figure out a way to coexist. And we realized that the closer the plants were, they were doing much better during summer and winter. But initially, this was not the case. When the plants were really in their nascent phase, we had them around 6 to 8 feet apart because that's what we thought. Okay, trees need to have a big space to grow and the canopy grows and things like that. Then we realized they were getting beaten, the harsh afternoon sun, and the winters were harsher. So then we started tucking in. The first layer of plants got established for 2 years, then we start tucking in trees under it. So there are trees behind trees behind trees, and now there are trees everywhere. But they're doing really well, and they look lush green, and there's so much life in the backyard. And once you start letting nature take over, you will be surprised how many more creatures it invites to your garden. And they find it automatically very safe, because it's like a good place to nest. And then there's also good place for them to find good food, so they can just go for the fruit on the trees, and we have fruit all around the year, one variety or the other. So we have grapes growing in this desert. We have a lot of jujubes. We have apricots, peaches. There's a huge variety of fruits that grow, figs and apples. There may not be all varieties of apples. We have selective varieties of apples that do well for the desert. Obviously, that also includes in your research part of seeing what actually grows well in your locality.
So, Lavanya, are you and your husband both into gardening?
He was mostly into gardening, and he was the one who did all the research. But then I kind of, I'm like the caretaker. I don't do much research. So my job essentially is much like a mother. I'm just making sure they're all fine, they've all eaten, and they're getting their rest. Just this. I think I'm just like a plant mom. Technically, at the end of the day, I just make sure they're healthy. That's about it. And to a great extent, I really am not somebody who will sit down and research about a plant. I somehow feel I'm learning just as I spend time with them.
There's even a word for that, and it's called experiential learner.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's me then. Yeah, I'm a very hands-on person. So you can talk to me about a plant and give me its genus, species, and its origin. Makes no sense to me. I'm like, hey, give me the plant. I'll figure it out, So, and like a lot of these plants, he would tell me, hey, this comes from the forests of India, or this is a kind of Hoya, and you just need to find your interest, right? What is it that interests you? There are people who enjoy novelty gardening, right? So where they like to grow things which look beautiful and they're beautifully manicured. I mean, there is every possible way for you to do your garden, right? There are people who enjoy ponds in the garden. Definitely go ahead putting a pond, add some koi fish and water lilies. It isn't necessarily that only if you grew trees, you're a gardener, or if you grew vegetables, you're a gardener. I think there's just a whole lot to experience in this, right? And I like a lot of flowering plants too. Not that I like plucking flowers or making vases. I'm just so surprised that once you have a few flowering plants, the amount of bees that visit your garden, the hummingbirds that visit your garden. And I felt we are already in an ecosystem where a lot of the trees and flowers and everything is so manicured and so trimmed. There are times I feel during winter the hummingbirds have no flowers, so you need to put out feeders for them. So I try to grow things more naturally so they have some sort of food source. So as a result of which, I always have hummingbird babies in my yard, and I get to watch it from the beginning to the end, and it's a wonderful experience. And honestly, like I said, I never prepared myself as a human being growing up thinking one day I'll be a gardener and this will be my goal. And I think it's a slow addiction towards where I've gotten, but definitely something that's good to lose your soul to, right? And it really lends you a lot of emotional support, and to understand that we always come from nature, right? And then we go back to the nature. All these struggles in between are just temporary, Everything moves on, with you, without you. It'll just go on.
Lavanya, earlier you mentioned about having fish or in a pond in the backyard. I'm curious, do you have any fish in your backyard now?
So we have a bunch of goldfish in our backyard. They're doing fine. They actually had babies this COVID time. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy these small little things. So we made a few water features in the garden. So initially, when I started the gardening group and things like that, I had seen other gardeners put out small bowls of water and things like that for the birds and bees during summer. Then I thought, hey, if water is so important for all the other creatures, why not we have a setup which actually has an aesthetic purpose and also helps uh, creatures, right? So then we started with my husband got water lily plants on eBay. You know, they deliver water lily on by post. So we bought a concrete container and we grew it. It grew beautifully. Then we realized that there was a lot of life around that pot during mid afternoons because it was hot. So all the birds that were taking refuge in the trees around had a place to drink water. And then we started noticing that the number of birds that were visiting our garden had increased because now they know there's a source of food and there's a source of water. Yes, they do eat fruit. That's fine. They also take care of a lot of pests, you know, in the lawn and a lot of things. So over time, what we realized is these water features, we expanded them to a few more. So we have a lot of hummingbirds. You can see one as we speak. And then we have, yeah. And then we have a lot of grackles. We even saw California orioles once that came as a pair. And we have a cactus wren. We have some doves, sparrows, a lot of finches. There's a whole lot of variety of birds. I don't even know their names too. They come here for the fruit. They have babies. There's a roadrunner that runs around, and there's a lot of lizards. So we try not to do any sort of pest control also because we realize that it starts interfering with the health of these creatures. So for the most part, we have not done any chemical treatment for any of the plants or trees. We compost all the vegetable scraps. We do our own yard maintenance, which means we collect all the leaves, shred the twigs, and then we mulch it. So all the heavy duty work my husband does, and I take care of the day-to-day checking on the plant's welfare and then making sure the seeds go in on time. And a lot of it is we want to keep a very organic way of gardening, even in terms of the visuals. We do not overly trim our trees. We pretty much leave it like nature intended it, except for the places where we feel it's overwhelming, the pool or something else, and we're like, hey, okay, it needs a little bit of a trim. But for the most part, we let it stay, and that actually helps the birds actually nest better because it gives them more protection from the other creatures. So they're really well hidden. So you'll find a lot of nests in the trees, and during spring, you'll be surprised to see how many babies. We wouldn't even know that they're there. You know, they're just so. It's beautiful. And then we've started seeing a lot of butterflies that come to the garden for the flowers, and obviously the pollinators. So we tuck in a lot of novelty stuff along with fruits and vegetables, and a lot of evergreen stuff, just so it is pleasing to the eye.
Okay, Lavanya, let's change the gears a little bit now and get to know Lavanya more. So this is a true or false answer, and I would say Lavanya is very patient. True. Is that correct?
Yes, patience definitely. One thing being a mom, the other thing being an art teacher for about 9 years, and I have worked with a lot of young children. It's amazing how children, right, and plants for that matter, you can't really get them to conform to you. They won't, unless they want to, right? So it's tricky, right? Sometimes you have to be tough with them, but sometimes you have to listen. Sometimes, yes, you have ground rules, and then sometimes you have to give in to their whatever the demands or whatever is. And you have to accept them as they are. Like some plants will refuse to grow no matter what you do. Still love you, right? Yes, and the same thing, I have had a lot of plants for years that probably just had 2 leaves. I don't think there was a day during the years when I thought, hey, I'm just tired of this plant, I'll yank it out. You know, people will usually say, hey, it doesn't do anything for me, I'll yank it out. I'm like, give it time, maybe it needs more time, you know. And yes, in my own experience, something like that, I had a plant for many years which had like 1 leaf and then it had 2 leaves. I think after 4 years, It had a flower. I just sat there and I was like, thank you. You proved me I wasn't wrong. So, yes, as a child, I was never patient. I don't think even today I'm that patient, but yes, I have learned a lot of patience from gardening because you cannot rush into doing anything. It will take a certain amount of time. Initially, I would sow a seed and then I would like, hey, there's no seedling yet. Or then you have to give it its time. It'll come when the weather is right. Because a lot of times when your seasons change so much, so the temperature of the soil has to be right for the seeds to sprout. And all this is a learning experience. You can do a lot of grow lights and this and that, but your patience is actually tested by nature. And if you want to persevere, the only way is to be calm and ride the wave, right?
All right, Lavanya, we have officially come to the end of this amazing conversation about gardening, and I'm very, very thankful to you for sharing so many detailed information and having this meaningful conversation, especially during social distancing, lockdown time, which makes a lot of difference. Having this quality time to talk and share some insights is very valuable. So I really appreciate that. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I would tell people try to stay in connect with nature. Grow a small plant. You'll be surprised how far we have gotten away from the nature connection. An indoor plant is one small way to get back to that. I don't say you should grow an indoor garden, greenhouse, or whatever. Start small. If you always had the doubt about gardening and if it is for you, believe me, it is far better than any kind of therapy or anything that you can imagine. It helps you find your focus. It helps you find your, people say meditation is the way. This is also a sort of meditation. It's happiness. It's joy, and you can enjoy it with your eyes open. So obviously it brings you back close to the ground and retaining all the values of nature, because we need to provide this platform for our children for healthier generations coming. So try to use far less herbicides or whatever kind of pesticides you're using. Try to go for more organic ways of controlling these. If you need to pull the weeds out, hey, spend some time outside and yank them out rather than putting herbicides, because all this ends up in our water system. And over years of this kind of abuse has already caused a lot of damage. I think we need to stop it, or rather be even more careful about how much we use. Obviously, it's not going to be easy to get away from it, but give it a try. And I think you will begin to appreciate what nature can do for you. Nature doesn't need you, but I think the amount of intervention we have created, now we have to stop, at least reduce the impact of it if you can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lavanya, for taking time to give our listeners this golden nuggets of information regarding both indoor and outdoor gardening in the desert of Arizona. Thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for listening, and I hope this episode brought a lot of inspiration for you to grow your own plants, have some life inside your house or outside your house. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, please feel free to reach out to me, and look forward to coming up more engaging, inspiring conversations with many of the people who are doing what they enjoy doing. And take care. Bye-bye.